And joining me now to discuss Richard Holbrooke's influence on world affairs is Associate Professor Brendon O'Connor from the Sydney University's US Studies Centre. Professor, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, Barack Obama said of Richard Holbrooke that he was a giant of American foreign policy. To borrow the President's term, what made him a giant? Indeed, was he one?
I think so. He was involved in so many things in the 20th century and into this century. He was involved in Vietnam, a co-author of the Pentagon Papers, Assistant Secretary of State for Jimmy Carter, then returns in the Clinton administration as ambassador to Germany when that relationship with the Germans needed to be worked through after unification. He was involved in the peace process with Yugoslavia, maybe the most important figure in the Dayton Peace Accords, goes on to be ambassador to the UN, always wanted to be Secretary of State, never quite made it, but he was... Maybe his personality. He was someone who ruffled feathers. I think he swore frequently. He was someone who the diplomatic niceties were a secondary consideration. Getting the job done was important to him, I think, in whatever way he could. He goes on, of course, in the Obama administration, not to be Secretary of State, but special representative, as he liked to call it. He said he'd been an envoy in Bosnia and he was going to be a special representative in his last job as working this very difficult question of Pakistan and Afghanistan and how to broker a diplomatic peace maybe in that relationship.
You mentioned there before that part of his personality was that maybe he rubbed people up the wrong way, that he was very direct, sometimes even a bully. How much was that a strength or a weakness in the type of diplomacy he had to engage in?
Well, he did create many enemies, but you could say he also was incredibly successful in that moment in Dayton in 1999. He had Slobodan Milosevic, he had many other very difficult people to negotiate with, very deep tensions to overcome, and I think he didn't just bully them into submission. He did yell at Milosevic, apparently, which people were sort of a legendary sort of story, but he also cajoled, he flattered, I think he used every sort of form of human emotion. Many people have compared him in recent hours to Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was a famous negotiator in the US Senate before he became president, and there was something known as the Johnson treatment, when you went into Johnson's room and he was going to win you over, and I think Holbrooke had a bit of that about him. He had a way of turning negotiations into a complete sort of emotional and human drama, and that I think was, you know, one of his great strengths and why he was quite loved in certain circles as well.
You mentioned his negotiations there with the former Yugoslavia situation. I guess that brought him to wider attention, broader attention. With a little bit of hindsight, just how great indeed was his contribution to bringing an end to hostilities there?
I think very important. I think, you know, all things considered, what was brokered over Bosnia has been very significant. There could have been many more deaths. The situation there was very combustible. It was a very complicated arrangement of ethnic groupings in Bosnia. So I think in some ways that will be, of course, his greatest legacy. That will be the thing that people will remember him by. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for it. He was very much at the heart of those negotiations.
Now, with that reputation, and then going forward into another incredibly complex conflict in Afghanistan, how much would have that reputation been a blessing? How much would have it been a burden for him to try and find a way through this very tangled diplomatic web?
A wicked problem he was involved with. I think he said himself to Bob Woodward in recent times that there were 10 ways that the Afghanistan situation might turn out, and 9 of them would be negative. Now, he was an optimist in regards to what might be possible in Afghanistan. So I think he wasn't negotiating on US soil as he was in Dayton, Ohio, with the parties in the disputes in the former Yugoslavia. He was having to negotiate in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. Now, he has been described as a rare American diplomat because he was someone who was comfortable in the bazaar. He was someone who was comfortable in foreign territory, negotiating with all types of people, but he wasn't on his own ground, and he was on a ground which was shaky, a lot of distrust, and that was a significant problem for him and all American diplomats, quite frankly, in that region.
And to end where we began, with a quote from President Obama, where Obama said of Richard Holbrooke that his work helped make the world a safer place. What do you think of that assessment?
I think so. I think so. There's probably Bosnian Muslims who, would be very grateful for what he's done. The task that he had in Afghanistan was so enormous, I think expectations wouldn't be fair to say he could have pulled off the same thing because the situation was so gravely different. But I think his career will be looked back upon. There probably is a great biography to be written there of someone who really just made a massive contribution to US foreign policy.
Maybe your next project.
A rather large one.
Associate Professor Brendon O'Connor from the US Studies Centre of the University of Sydney, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.